Hi everybody, this is Ibarionex from the Candid Frame. When I go out to photograph on the street, there is something that I like to practice that is repeatable. It's basically my process. And I never go out there with the intent of photographing something specific in particular. I don't hunt for a specific subject matter. But I like to go out there and be open completely. I go out as an open slate. But I still have to sort of get into the groove of photographing on the street. And the three things that I focus on as I'm trying to examine my surroundings and the things around me are light, setting, and gesture. And I chose three images to discuss that because I want to sort of explain what my process is when I go out into the street and I try to make my photographs. And I think it'll be helpful to you, especially if you go out in the street and you struggle with trying to find, the ideal or perfect subject for your photography. All right, here we have a shot by Alan Hammer. This was made with a Canon EOS Rebel T5i at 1/200th of a second, f11, ISO 1600. So this was made in an aquarium. So the blue that we're seeing behind these two subjects here is a large water tank, even though we don't see any of the animals that are probably in the tank. And this light and this blue background is the very first thing that I'm always keeping an eye out for, the light. I'm always looking for where is the light coming from, because that tells me so much about what I'm going to contend with, not only in terms of ISO and shutter speed, but also with relation to how light is going to illuminate my subject and the surroundings around my subject. Alan here uses that to his advantage to help create this really beautiful silhouette where this almost cobalt blue just immediately draws your attention, and it creates this very high contrast rendering of the human figures that are in the frame. So one of the things I'm always looking for is light and examining the light. I'm not just looking at the light and going, okay, where's light? I'm analyzing the light. Is it hard? Is it contrasty? Is it soft and diffuse? Because that's going to tell me a lot about how that particular type of light is going to render a subject or a scene. In this particular case, because of the situation of the tank relative to the subjects, it's going to be a silhouette, and that's the way that Alan renders it, because there's a big contrast range between the light that's coming from the surface of the water down into the tank and this interior area, which in aquariums is usually a little darker in order to sort of emphasize what's happening inside of the tank. So after I examine light, then I start thinking about setting. And in this case, the tank itself provides a bit of the setting. It's not just the light, it's not just the blue. The interior of the tank has this texture. It's almost painterly. It's like a canvas that you would normally see in a photo studio. And it has this gradation of tone and color that provides a really beautiful backdrop for this silhouette. And also it makes the background incredibly clean. There's not a lot of clutter. There is not a lot of distracting elements in the scene, which is typical when you go out and photograph in the street, especially a busy street scene. There are so many things that have the potential to be distractions, and you have to be hyper aware of those things, especially those things along the edges of the frame. So here we have light and we have setting, and you kind of figure out those two things first and foremost. And then I think about the gesture. And in this case, the gesture is a variety of different things. Gesture here is the body language of both of the figures, both the man on the right, whose head is tilted slightly towards the woman on the left. The glasses on his chest, that's a little bit of a gesture. And then the woman on the left, even though we don't see her complete face in profile, we see the gesture of her hand extending out from about her waist. And there is a nice little final gesture, which I like, which is the reflection of the glasses on top of her head here. All of that I associate with gesture. It's that little sort of something I always struggle with trying to come up with another word to describe gesture. But those small little details are the kind of things I'm always hunting for, that I'm always looking for, that help to elevate a shot from just being a mundane, ordinary snapshot and make it into something exceptional. It's those small details that we're seeing here that I've just pointed out that really make this image really, really strong. Ideally, I would have loved to have seen a little more of the woman's profile here, but I don't know if you can see it here in the video, but there is a little highlight on her face to help bring out some details of her lips and her eyes. I might have liked her slightly over to the right, but I think the shot nevertheless combines all those three things I'm talking about really, really well and creates a really sort of striking photograph, because I can imagine that in a scene like this, you could have a cluster of people looking into the tank. But what I like about this scene and the way that Alan renders it is that, both of these subjects are pretty well defined in relationship to the light and the background. And when you're thinking about light and setting and the relationship of your subject to that, it's always about how cleanly does your subject read as compared to the elements that are immediately behind them and sometimes within the foreground. So always keep that in mind when you're making your shots. Don't be so focused on your subject that you're not paying attention to everything else that's in the frame, especially those things that are immediately behind the subject. All right, here is a shot by Dalibor Papcun. This was made with a Nikon D750 at 1/500th of a second, f4.5, ISO 100. Now, this is the kind of shot I have made probably hundreds of times. Whenever I ride the escalator from the subway here in Los Angeles, there are a couple of stops where the light cuts through the scene in much the same way as this here. At certain times of the day, the light cuts down and renders part of the scene in shadow and the other in highlight. And I'm always looking for the moment when the subject appears from the shadow into the highlight in order to make my shot. And I'm always sort of hoping that I get an interesting character, an interesting subject matter. But let's break this down so you kind of understand this whole idea of that I'm talking about today. Well, first, the quality of the light here. You get this high contrast light that's created by the whatever sort of physical structure exists above this scene that cuts off the light and creates this very strong diagonal line and creates this wonderful triangle of dark and light in the frame. So almost immediately when I see light like this, I immediately gravitate to the point of transition. That point of transition between light and shadow. For me, that's the sweet spot for any scene in which I think I'm going to try and achieve a photograph. So when you find a scene like that, always look for the transition. Don't just think about photographing something in complete shadow or in complete highlight. Think about how your eye is automatically drawn to contrast, especially this kind of contrast, and how you might leverage it for a street photograph, a portrait, or any kind of image. The next thing is the setting. And here you have a lot of things. Don't even think about the subject. Just look at the setting right now. Think about the way these diagonal lines that are created by this structure that serves as the boundary of the escalator. You got these very strong diagonal lines that go from the left down to the right and disappear into shadow. You have these sort of rectangular patterns that are on the wall here that are repeated over and over again before they fall off into shadow. You have these small little triangle elements that appear, that repeat here, that kind of mimic the various triangles that exist throughout the frame. That is the setting. That is the foreground, the background. This is the space in which the scene is playing out. So when you see a scene like this, even before someone comes into the frame, you're able to look at this and analyze it and bring the camera to your eye and start refining your frame and think about, okay, where do I place my camera? How much of the highlight do I include? How much of the shadow do I include? Do I go horizontal? Do I go vertical? Do I zoom out or do I zoom back in? You can refine your frame because this scene is dynamic. It's constantly changing as people are going up or down this escalator. So you can take the time to carefully compose the frame even before your actor, for lack of a better word, enters the scene. And that's what I always do when I find a scene like this. I figure out my frame well before the moment that I eventually capture in the shot. Then the last thing, of course, is the gesture. And think about why this shot really works, because typically when people are going up or down an escalator, their body is not positioned in the way that this woman's body is. And that is not a particularly interesting shot. Sometimes the person may have a phone to their ear, or they may be scratching their nose, and you're really dependent on either the person being a really interesting character or possessing some sort of element of outfit or color that makes that person stand out, especially when you're dealing with color. In this case, this woman is going up or down the escalator sideways. So she is facing the camera. And that in and of itself provides a wonderful gesture, because her body here, her head, the way her arms are placed, creates this triangle, and we're able to sort of navigate her shape here and get to this point here of contrast right here at her face and at her chest. And our eyes are immediately drawn to her. One, because she's the brightest element of the frame, but also because she's at this point of contrast between light and dark. Knowing that about the scene, knowing what the point of contrast is between light and dark, being aware of the lines that exist within the frame, tells you where you need your subject to be in order to make the shot. And it just works out that this woman provides just the perfect subject matter, not only in terms of who she is and what she looks like, but in terms of the body language and the gesture that she provides. You can see that seeing the light and seeing the setting first, that takes care of 2/3 of your shot. And you can figure that out well before this or anyone else enters the frame. And then at that point, it's just a waiting game. It's about waiting it out, shooting pictures as different people come into the scene, but being patient and waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right gesture to help complete the shot. If you just take a picture of the first person that comes up that escalator and then you keep moving, most likely that first person is not going to give you what you need to complete the shot. You're almost there, but you have to practice patience in order to complete it. All right, here we have a photo by Vitor Damasio. This was made with the Fuji XE1 at 125th of a second, f5, ISO 800. This is just a lovely, lovely shot. And again, check out the light here. The light is really key to the success of this shot. It illuminates this brickwork here that's painted in yellow, and this table here, and there's this gold orange color that is just absolutely bright, vibrant, that's made as a result of this light that hits the scene. Imagine the scene with more diffused light, where the light is even, where we don't have any strong contrast. Not only would that pattern that exists on the wall be less pronounced, but those colors that are such a big draw in this photograph wouldn't be there. It would just be these muted, sort of dull colors that wouldn't pop in the way they do now. And seeing this light on this surface makes all the difference in the world. Because, again, don't even see the man in the scene. Imagine that this man is not in the frame and you just come upon this scene. This is a scene that I would be immediately drawn to because I love the quality of the light. And then I start examining what's happening with the setting. I see the pattern. I see the color contrast. I see that pipe at the top of the frame. I see the little kiss of light on the wall over here, and there's a little fall off over here. I see the little highlights on the chairs. I see the light below the table here. I see light and how it informs setting. And again, I'm processing it. I'm taking a look at the scene. I'm going, okay, if and when that subject comes into this frame, how would I compose this shot? And again, I start making those choices in terms of how am I going to expose it. I'm going to underexpose it. I'm going to overexpose it. Am I going to go horizontal? Am I going to go vertical? Am I going to go really wide? I'm going to go tele. How much do I get further back? Do I move in tighter? I think about all of those things as I'm evaluating the scene, and I'm actually actively taking photographs, trying to figure out, okay, what's the sweetest composition for this scene? But as I'm doing this, if people are walking past, I still will make pictures, even though I know that that subject is probably not the ideal subject, because I want to see how the light falls on them, because I will learn a lot from doing that. I'll figure out, do I need my subject to be coming from my right or to my left? Does the light fall better on them when they're coming from the right to the left? If so, then as I'm shooting, I'm constantly going to be eyeing the people coming from my left side and less so from the left. And so I start thinking about, okay, what do I need to happen? And what do I need to get ready? What do I need to do in order to be ready for it when the moment does present itself? Because I'm just cutting down all the things that might result in me missing the shot, because I'm having to process and make choices at the very last minute. I'm already making my choices before the scene presents itself. And then you have this subject here, which I think is absolutely wonderful, right? One of the reasons that this character is so great is his body language, is the gesture, the way he is leaning forward into this frame. That's the gesture there. But there's also the gesture of that white hair, that tuft of white hair that's coming out from beneath the brim of his hat. And that is just this wonderful, bright white that just draws you directly to him and his body language. Then there's the wonderful color contrast between the blueness of his coat and the yellow. That color contrast adds some vibrance and some pop into the scene. I even like that white collar of his shirt, and you can see his sunglasses right below it. Even though we don't see his eyes in this shot, we get a sense of him, of his presence in the photograph. And even though he isn't tack sharp, the focus is more on the wall. That doesn't bother me at all. You know, you have to make an aesthetics choice sometimes, because what was the f-stop he was using here? He was shooting at about f5 at 1/25th of a second. So if he had pre-focused on the spot where people were going to walk, that yellow background would be a lot more softer, and he really couldn't go with a smaller aperture to get more depth of field, because the shutter speed would have gone down to a 60th, 30th of a second. Yes, you can increase your ISO, but again, that's another consideration that you have to make. Do you want to increase the noise in the scene, especially since so much of the scene is relegated to shadow? So all of those calculations, all of those considerations you have to make before you could make the shot. And by analyzing a scene well before you actually make the photograph, you take care of a lot of that business. All of those choices have already been made. And then all that's necessary at this point is just an issue of timing. You see your subject coming in from the right, you go, oh, this is going to be a great subject. You make whatever refinements you need to do in terms of your camera position, and you wait for them to get into the right spot, and you click the shutter, and you make your photograph. So the moment of actually making the picture is just the buildup of everything else that you've done before. And I don't know how long Vitor was here, whether he was here just a couple of seconds or 2 minutes or 20 minutes. But going through the process of looking at light, looking at setting, and then finally looking for gesture, those three things are repeatable regardless of what you are photographing. And once you get into the practice of doing that over and over and over again, it becomes so intuitive, you don't even think about it. That is just what you do in order to make a photograph. And that's what I do to make a photograph, and why I think I'm able to succeed even on days where I don't feel particularly conducive to making photographs. There are some days I go out to make a photograph and I'm just feeling crappy. But despite the fact that I'm feeling crappy, I just get into the rhythm of looking for light, setting, and gesture. It just becomes this muscle memory thing. And once I start doing that, whatever feelings I had about how crappy my day may have started off with are quickly put aside, and I just start making photographs. Hope you enjoyed that. If you want to learn more about photography, about your camera, and some of the principles that I talk about in these videos, check out the Candid Frame Photo Essentials ebook and video. It is a 59-page full-color ebook and 3 hours of streaming video, which talks about the principles of shutter speed and ISO and white balance and color, all the sort of the technical stuff, along with some of the concepts that we've talked about here, on this YouTube channel. And you can get it for just $29. Normally it's $69, but just use the promo code TCF17 and you'll get it for just $29. And it helps support the channel and the Candid Frame and all the work that we do here. And for those of you who don't know what the Candid Frame is, the Candid Frame is actually a podcast that I've been doing for the last 10.5 years, which features conversations with some of the world's best emerging and established photographers. And we release episodes every week, and you can check it out by going to thecandidframe.com or downloading the free Candid Frame app. And if you have a passion for photography, which you no doubt have if you're watching this video, I guarantee you're going to hear some great conversations on the show. And if you want to join the Flickr community here, simply go to the Candid Frame on Flickr, ask to be added, and I'll be glad to do so. And if you like what you're seeing here, please like this video and subscribe. All right, guys. See you next time.